Playing Pokemon Draft League for a number of years, I think that it's very common that players will plan out their drafts 4 or 5 picks in advance, maybe more, and use that to inform the Pokemon that they draft from round to round. And I think that this has some insidiously detrimental effects that I think can be avoided by picking more spontaneously. For those of you who are not familiar, Pokemon Draft League is a league of about 12 to 16 players that pick teams of 10 to 12 Pokemon from the pool of Pokemon allowed. So this is typically a generational dex like Gen 9 or Gen 7 or Nat Dex. The ban list can vary, but typically the power level ends up at about OU, probably a little stronger. For instance, most Gen 9 draft leagues these days, they allow Shenpao and stuff like Iron Bundle, but they're not typically allowed to Terra. There's also a lot of different rules around terrestrialization and complex bans and what have you. So, but that's not especially important to my argument, so I'll gloss over the details for now. Each team has a budget of points that can be used to purchase Pokemon proportional to how good they are. So a Shenpao might cost 20 points, a Tinglu might cost 17 points, I'm trying to think of a not so good. A Tangrowth, might cost 11 points, and a Lomomola might cost 13 points, and so on and so forth. Once a Pokemon is drafted, nobody else can draft it, meaning you'll at max play 1 Goldengo, 1 Kingambit, 1 Landorus, and so on and so forth. Teams play each other. They bring 6 of their 10 to 12 Pokemon into a Pokemon battle in a group stage and playoffs depending on seeding from the group stage. That's the gist of it, but the element that I'd like to focus on today is the draft. Now, because you're going to be stuck with the same set of 12 or 10 to 12 Pokemon for the entire season, barring some trades that you can do, but those tend to be limited in capacity, you want to really make sure your initial team is as good as you can possibly get it, right? So it seems natural that you consider that and then say, oh, well, I want to make a plan, because if I plan it out, I can understand the intricacies of my draft much better. And sure, that it sounds correct, but I think in practice that actually tends to not be the case. So let's talk about what the perceived benefits of having a plan are. I've asked around, and I think the biggest things are the 2 biggest reasons that I've thought of and I found when asking around are that one would prefer to create a draft with like quote-unquote cohesion, right? And second, it's worth keeping track of points. Where I'd like to provide a counter argument for the idea of planned drafts being more cohesive. So this is a good idea on paper, but it can often cause you to lose out on value that makes up for some inefficiency. You might think that double types and overlapping roles are not good all the time, but in draft it's kind of different because the format is different in that you can prepare very specifically for your opponent, and if you pick a Pokemon that it's very rare that you'll actually end up bringing a Pokemon to a game that can get no value, right? So even if there's overlap in your build, it's not that much of a problem. For instance, recently I drafted a team with Shenpao and Tapu Fini as the first picks, but then I realized, hey, there is a Tinglu left on the board, and that, like, I really want that. Like, sure, I'm doubling up on a dark typing, but it's so early in the draft, I can patch the weakness later, and it's just immense value, even though I overlap on a weakness, to have Tinglu and Shenpao, right? And I think if I had a plan of you know, 6-7 Pokemon that I would pick after Shenpao and Tapu Fini, then it's kind of it would be hard to kind of notice the value, because when you after you build that squad and you kind of look at it, you're like, okay, I have some conviction in this, right? So it's hard for you to branch out and like stay active, I guess, during your draft. Second, if you make a draft plan and something gets sniped, trying to force the roles on your draft to be filled at the same pace is problematic. Say you have a plan, right? This is a very simple one. You want to draft Shenpao and Landorus Therian along with Goldengo, right? And you're thinking, oh, I want Goldengo because, you know, it's got the Dark Ghost typing, I get the Fairy Resist, it can break in some matchups, it can act as speed control in some matchups with Scarf, you know, and I can block status. That'll be really useful, right? And then you keep planning deeper than that, and you're like, okay, so maybe based off of that, I build a stack mode, right? Like I build some hazard stack. I can get Goldengo to break special walls for me, and then so on and so forth. And then Goldengo gets sniped, right? And then you're like, well, I already have this plan. It necessitates that I have a Steel Ghost typing. And, you know, I need it to fill some of these roles. Well, I guess what I'll do is just, like, pick Aegislash or something, right? Like, or this kind of thing I see very often with people that build these very deep plans. And that's a problem, because Aegislash, it has the same typing as Goldengo, but they're not, like, they're nowhere close to this able to fill the same roles. Like, Goldengo, you know, Goldengo can block Fog, Aegislash can't. Goldengo can act as, like, reliable speed control. Aegislash has Shadow Sneak, but it's not really the same. Aegislash is much more defensive, and it breaks more physical, and Goldengo can't. Aegislash plays a lot slower because it wants to take advantage of recovery with leftovers and, you know, like Toxic and so on and so forth. But and Goldengo, it can move the needle significantly faster than Aegislash in a lot of ways. So you might look at this whole plan that you have and think like, oh, well, hey, you know, it patches the weaknesses. You know, I still have the same thing here, but it's just not the same, right? Furthermore, if you decide that you're going to fill some part of your draft later, but you're unable to due to unforeseen circumstances, your draft will end up being highly problematic. Like, there are so many cases I can remember where people, you know, they make these plans and they're like, okay, I'm going to get my removal here, I'm going to get my hazards here, I'm going to get, like, my ground type here, and they get sniped, right? And then it's like, they just get, like, caught with their fucking pants down. It's like, well, I kind of, well, I was kind of counting on the fact, you know, like, the plan kind of lulled me into a false sense of security. I ended up, you know, postponing my need for, like, removal or whatever. So now I have some high tiers that are weak to removal, and I don't have a high tier remover I can bring every week. Instead, I have, like, Skuntank or whatever, like, that can defog, and it's like, well, like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Like, you can't bring a Skuntank every week, and, you know, that's not a reliable remover. But essentially, my point is that a different high tier anywhere within your first 4 to 5 picks will dramatically alter the shape of your draft most of the time. And planning around that kind of thing will cause you to lose value. And if something goes wrong in the plan and you have to completely pivot, then what is the point of the plan in the first place, right? Like, if my draft is going to go in a completely different direction based on whether or not I pick Landorus Therian or Tapu Lele, or Tapu Fini, sorry, in my second round, then why should I plan for both of those routes? Why wouldn't I just pick one of them and then keep figuring out as I go? And that logic applies pretty much until the end of your draft. Of course, there's the idea that you want to keep track of your points. However, the less valuable your Pokemon are, like, if you think, okay, like, you know, you have your Chien-Paos, you have your Tornadus Therians, you have your Rotom Washes, like, whatever, those are all relatively high tier, right? And then, as you go down, your mons are probably going to get cheaper, you know, it'll become, like, Belly Bolts, Alomomolas, Sinistchas, and so on and so forth. You're not going to bring those every week. So the thing is, you actually don't need to manage your points as well towards the bottom of your draft. The less valuable your Pokemon are, the less you should hopefully bring them. And this means that your lower Pokemon are less impactful. Even if you end up with a lot of shitters, it's not necessarily a problem unless you've missed some critical role in your top few Pokemon. And again, so like, again, that goes back to why getting your high tiers right and considering all your options is so important. And that's like, and that's why tunneling on a plan is so dubious, right? Last thing I want to say is, I think that for people who really know what they're doing, they can consider all their options, and they build good drafts. Well, if you think about it that way, then you don't need to plan your drafts at all, right? You just have to, every round, take a good look at the board, try to figure out where the value is, and then go from there. So for those people, there's no reason to plan. For complete novices, if they're making plans, then their plans are not going to be good, right? So there's no point in doing that either. So just look at the board and look at Pokemon that you think are good and then play those, right? For people who are more in the middle, I guess that's where things get a little bit more murky, because, I mean, maybe you could say that they're not so good at looking at the options, and so they should just build drafts and try to solidify a baseline level. Like maybe your draft is like a 7 out of 10 when you could have gotten a 9 out of 10 if you were more careful with your picks. But I mean, I think looking at trying to get all the value you can out of your picks is something that you need to practice, right? So I think it's kind of silly to say like, oh, you know, if you can't find all the options and, you know, your drafts might be a little volatile, well, then you should just plan. Especially because planning has all of those associated risks I talked about earlier. So I hope I've convinced you about the problems with planning your drafts in Pokemon Draft League. I used to do this a lot myself, and I think that my drafts have improved dramatically because I've abandoned this whole, oh, you know, just plan everything right in advance. The truth is, drafting is just not like that. Just look at what's on the board. Look at where the value is. Like if you see cheap Pokemon for good prices, you can be redundant. You can break team building convention as long as you kind of as long as you make good calls about what's valuable or not, and you know a thing or two about how those things should be supported. I hope what I said was of some use to you and that you have a good day.